Chances are you've got questions about the book of Revelation. Also known as the Apocalypse, Revelation is filled with images and symbols that are difficult for modern day interpreters to understand. On top of that, there's all kinds of crazy, wild interpretations that are terribly unhelpful and only make things more confusing. How then do we make sense of this text we call Revelation, the last book of the New Testament? In this video, I'm going to give you 3 principles for interpretation that will help you begin to read Revelation profitably and well. If you're new to Theology Project and you particularly are interested in the book of Revelation, consider subscribing to the channel. My name is Dr. Matt O'Reilly. I serve as lead pastor of Christ Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm getting ready to spend the bulk of this year preaching through the entirety of the book of Revelation. So there's going to be a lot of material, things happening, things I'm thinking about that are going to make their way into Theology Project videos. So lots more to come on Revelation. If that's of interest to you, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I've also got some of my favorite books on Revelation linked in the description below, so scroll down and check those out, and take a second to leave a comment and tell me what your favorite resource on Revelation is. I'd love to hear from you, and maybe you can recommend something I haven't seen yet. All right, let's take a look at those 3 principles for interpreting Revelation well. Number 1, any interpretation of Revelation must make sense of Revelation's first century Jewish context. One of the reasons there are so many wacky interpretations out there when it comes to the book of Revelation is because the interpreters are interpreting it in their own context, not in its original cultural and literary context. Revelation is addressed to believers, Jewish believers, in the first century, Christians in the Roman Empire who are suffering and struggling. The images in Revelation are very much images and symbols that they would have understood. The images are taken from their literature, from their world. These aren't strange to them. It's the sort of thing they would have been able to discern and figure out. It would have made sense to them. So we would be wise to spend time reflecting on the world of images and symbols in the Second Temple period of Judaism, the kinds of images that first century Jews would have understood well as we try to read and understand the book of Revelation. Take, for example, the image of the beasts in Revelation. This is one of the images, one of the figures that gets a ton of energy, and all kinds of crazy stuff has been said about the beasts in Revelation. Well, the image of a beast, while strange to us, would not have been strange to Jewish readers of the Bible in the first century. Beasts were common images in Second Temple biblical texts and non-biblical texts, and those beasts symbolized pagan empires or governments or powers that oppressed the people of God or took them into captivity or persecuted the people of God. And so an original reader of Revelation would have immediately thought about the empire, the power, the oppressive structure of the day, namely the Roman Empire and Caesar at its head. So the image of the beast isn't an invitation to us to begin to try to figure out which contemporary figure this thing is talking about. That's not the point at all. It's misguided. It's not helpful. No, the image of the beast is about identifying the reality that there are powers at work in the world that oppose God's purposes. And those powers are beastly in their very essence. By the way, I'm planning to have a specific video on the mark of the beast coming up soon. So if that interests you, be sure to subscribe to Theology Project. Tap the bell to get notified so you don't miss it when it comes out. Number 2, Revelation is not a timeline of future events. I frequently hear people say things like, well, we're living in this chapter of Revelation, or that period of history should be aligned with that section of Revelation. If that's the approach you've encountered, that approach is misguided, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the book of Revelation works. Revelation is not intended to be read like a history book of future events. It's not even intended to be read chronologically. Instead, it consistently brings up a series of topics and then invites the reader to look at those topics from different angles. Here's an example. Take the seals that the Lamb is worthy to unseal and the trumpets that come afterwards. The seals are not a period of history, or individual seals aren't associated with different events. No, the seals are intended to insist on the preeminence of the Messiah, the first rider on the white horse. The seals are intended to acknowledge the reality of evil and powerful, wicked forces at work in the world, Riders 2, 3, and 4. Then you get an affirmation of the plight of the martyrs and the injustice that's been done to them in that they died for their faithfulness to the Messiah, Jesus. Then you get an image of judgment with the sixth seal. When the trumpets come along, the trumpets are an amplification of the judgment, the motif of judgment that you get in the sixth seal. So it's not something different. Think of the seals as a zoomed out, big picture account of the whole of human history and the reality of sin and wickedness and death and evil in the world. The seals are intended to insist that that world has not been forgotten by God, that He is at work surprisingly and righteously to accomplish His purposes and to put things right. He will judge wickedness. That's the message of the seals. And then the trumpets zoom into that concept of judgment and give us a more thorough, detailed, rounded vision of the seriousness of God's judgment and the thoroughness of God's judgment. So think of the seals as the zoomed out big picture, less detail, but theological emphasis on God's righteousness and His commitment to judge wickedness. And then think of the trumpets as zooming in on that sixth seal and its account of judgment to give us an even more thorough vision of God's commitment to judge wickedness. So these aren't two different things. It's the same thing from different angles. That means Revelation shouldn't be read chronologically. It's not a timeline of events. It offers us theological commentary on a few certain motifs so that we get a well-rounded vision of what's going on. Principle number 3, it's about Jesus. Revelation is all about Jesus. Read chapter 1, verse 1. This is a revelation of Jesus Christ. The first figure that John sees in Revelation is Jesus, one like a son of man, the Messiah. And then later on, John sees a vision of a lamb that looks like it's been slain and it's standing in the center of the throne of heaven. That's an image of the Messiah, of Jesus, aligning him with the power of God. And then he's the one who's able to open the seals, which means he's the one who is preeminent and at work to judge wickedness and unrighteousness. All through Revelation, it's the Lamb who triumphs, it's the Lamb who acts, it's the Lamb who works. Revelation is focused on the person and work of Jesus all the way through. So it's not an invitation to kind of identify this, that, or the other. It's an invitation to see how Jesus is broadly engaged and at work in the world to put things right, to deal with evil, to vindicate those who have suffered, and to offer a word of comfort to His people. Revelation is about Jesus, and if you don't lose sight of that, you'll be well on your way to a clearer and more profitable reading of this ancient text. So those are my 3 initial recommendations for how to read Revelation well. Pay attention to the Jewish context. Don't treat it like a timeline. And remember, this thing is about Jesus, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. I'm Matt O'Reilly. This is Theology Project. If you found that helpful, you might find one of these other videos that are showing beside me now helpful. Click on those, check them out. See you next time.